I was holding a $25 pie in the baking aisle of the grocery store when my daughter casually erased me from her holiday. The store smelled heavily of cinnamon and roasted chicken packed with last-minute shoppers rushing through the aisles. I balanced the bakery box in one hand and pulled out my phone with the other. I dialed Sarah's number. She answered on the third ring, sounding distracted. Pumpkin or apple pie for Thanksgiving? I asked, looking at the two remaining boxes on the shelf. There was a long pause on the other end. The background noise of her house went suspiciously quiet. "Oh, we already did that yesterday," she mumbled. "Greg's parents had to leave early for a trip, so we just threw something together on Wednesday." I stood perfectly still. It was Thursday morning. Thanksgiving Day. "All right," I replied. I didn't ask questions. I didn't demand an explanation. I just hung up the phone. I looked at the pumpkin pie in my hand. I placed it gently into my shopping cart, paid for it, and drove back to my empty house. My husband passed away 5 years ago, and since then, I had spent every major holiday at Sarah's house. I was the one who bought their groceries, cooked the turkey, and cleaned the kitchen afterward while they watched football. I set the pie on my kitchen counter. The house was quiet, filled only with the hum of the refrigerator. I made myself a cup of black tea and sat at the dining table. I didn't cry. At 64, I had learned that tears rarely solved anything. Instead, I opened my tablet to read the morning news, casually tapping on the social media icon first. That was when I found out exactly why my daughter had lied to me. The first picture on my feed was posted by Greg's sister, Jessica. The caption read, "Thankful for the best hosts." Thanksgiving today. I zoomed in on the photo. It was a wide shot of Sarah's dining room taken clearly just a few hours ago, judging by the morning sunlight streaming through the windows. The table was beautifully set for 12 people. Sarah and Greg stood at the head of the table, smiling brightly. Greg's parents were there, looking very much not on a trip. Several of Sarah's friends were seated around the edges. They were eating off the expensive ceramic plates I bought them for their anniversary. Right in the center of the table sat my silver gravy boat, the one I had let Sarah borrow last month. They didn't have dinner yesterday. They were having it right now. They simply didn't want me there. I stared at the screen, observing every detail. I noticed the new crystal wine glasses they were using. I noticed the expensive floral centerpieces. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt a sudden freezing clarity. For 3 years, I had been paying their monthly car loan because things were tight. I paid their cell phone family plan to help them save. I was their safety net, their free babysitter, their personal ATM. They wanted my money, my plates, and my gravy boat. But they didn't want the widowed mother sitting at their aesthetic, youthful holiday table. I closed the app and set the tablet down. I walked into my home office and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. I pulled out a thick blue folder containing all my financial documents and passwords. If I was no longer a part of their family table, I was no longer going to fund it. I flipped open my laptop and logged into my bank account. The bank's website loaded slowly, but my hands moved with absolute precision. I navigated to the scheduled transfers page. Right there at the top was the recurring monthly payment of $650 labeled Sarah and Greg SUV. I clicked the small trash can icon next to it. A prompt appeared asking if I was sure I wanted to cancel this recurring transfer. I clicked yes. Next, I opened a new tab and logged into my cellular provider's portal. I was the primary account holder on a family plan that included 4 lines. 2 of those lines belonged to my daughter and my son-in-law. I clicked on the device management tab. I selected Sarah's number, then Greg's. I hit the option to remove them from the plan, setting the cancellation to take effect at midnight. It took less than 10 minutes. No arguments, no dramatic speeches. Just a few clicks of a mouse, and the financial scaffolding I had built beneath them vanished. I closed the laptop and walked to the guest bedroom. The closet was full of things I had purchased for them over the last few months. A heavy winter coat for Greg, expensive skincare sets for Sarah, and a pile of organic snacks they liked. I found a large cardboard box in the garage, brought it inside, and began packing all of it away. I wouldn't throw it out. I would donate it to the local women's shelter on Monday. I went back to the kitchen, cut myself a large slice of the pumpkin pie, and ate it while looking out the window at my garden. The afternoon sun was warm and golden. I felt lighter than I had in years. My phone sat silently on the counter, but I knew exactly what would happen when the morning came. Friday morning arrived with the buzzing vibration of my phone dancing across the nightstand. I picked it up. It was 7:15 a.m. There were 4 missed calls from Sarah and 7 text messages. Mom, my phone says no service. Did you forget to pay the bill? Greg's phone is down too. We have to go to work. Also, my card declined at the coffee shop. Did you mess with the bank transfer? Call me ASAP. I didn't reply. I turned the phone on silent, placed it face down on the kitchen counter, and started my coffee pot. An hour later, my neighbor Brenda knocked on the back door. Brenda was 66, sharp as a tack, and never missed a thing in our neighborhood. I opened the door and handed her a mug of coffee. I saw the whole circus online, Brenda murmured, taking a sip. I saw Jessica's post. I am so sorry, Vanessa. Don't be. I smiled gently. It was quite educational. Brenda sighed, leaning against the counter. I ran into Sarah at the butcher on Tuesday. She was buying a massive turkey. She told me they were having a Friendsgiving this year because she wanted a stress-free dinner without any boomer complaints about the food. I nodded slowly. The picture was complete. I wasn't just forgotten. I was actively avoided. What are you going to do? Brenda asked, looking concerned. I've already started, I answered, picking up my car keys from the hook by the door. But there's one more thing I need to take care of today. I need to make a quick trip to their house. Brenda raised an eyebrow. Going to yell at them? No, I replied smoothly. I'm just going to collect something that belongs to me. I pulled into Sarah and Greg's driveway just before noon. Greg's shiny SUV, the one I was no longer paying for, was parked out front. I walked up the pathway and rang the doorbell. Sarah opened the door. She looked stressed, holding her phone in one hand. When she saw me, her eyes widened in a mix of guilt and annoyance. Mom, why aren't you answering your phone? Our cell service is completely cut off, and the car payment didn't clear. I didn't step inside. I stood on the porch, keeping my posture straight and my voice even. I know Sarah. I canceled them. She blinked, stunned. What? Why? I decided to reorganize my finances, I stated plainly. Since I'm no longer attending family holidays, I figured I no longer need to pay family expenses. But that's not why I'm here. I held out my hand. I need my spare house key back. Sarah stared at my outstretched palm. Your key, why, Mom? You can't just cut off our phones. Greg needs it for work. Greg is a grown man. He can set up his own phone plan, I replied. The key, Sarah. I need it in case of emergencies at your house. She protested, her voice rising. I've given a spare to Brenda. I countered, not dropping my hand. I need yours back. Now, please. She huffed, turned around, and stomped to the entryway table. She snatched the key off a hook and practically threw it into my hand. As she did, I glanced past her shoulder. Sitting on her kitchen counter was a brand new, highly expensive espresso machine, at least $1,000. Enjoy your new coffee maker. I smiled faintly, slipping the key into my pocket. Before she could form a reply, I turned and walked back to my car, leaving her standing open-mouthed in the doorway. When I got back to my own house, I walked straight into the garage. For the past 2 years, I had been parking my modest sedan in the driveway, exposed to the rain and sun. Why? because Greg had convinced me he needed temporary storage for his heavy-duty woodworking tools, a massive table saw, and his vintage dirt bike. Temporary had turned into 24 months of free storage space. I opened the garage door and rolled up my sleeves. The tools were heavy, but they were mostly on wheeled carts. I pushed the table saw out onto the driveway. I rolled the dirt bike out next to it. I carried boxes of his specialized wood clamps and expensive golf clubs, stacking them neatly outside. It took me almost 2 hours of steady, quiet work. My shoulders ached, but the physical exertion felt incredibly satisfying. I was clearing out the entitlement. Once everything was outside, I grabbed a large, heavy-duty, waterproof tarp from the gardening shed. I draped it over the entire pile of his belongings and secured it tightly with bungee cords. Then I pulled my car into the newly emptied garage and hit the button to close the door. I went inside, washed my hands, and picked up my phone. I sent a single text message to Greg over Wi-Fi since I knew he'd probably be using his home internet by now. Greg, I need my garage space back. Your tools and bike are under a tarp in my driveway. Please pick them up by Sunday evening, or I will arrange for a junk removal service to take them on Monday morning. 10 minutes later, the sound of a vehicle speeding down my street broke the afternoon quiet. Brakes squealed as Greg's SUV jerked to a halt in front of my house. Both car doors slammed shut, almost simultaneously. I watched from the living room window as Greg and Sarah marched up the driveway, stopping abruptly when they saw the massive tarp covering his precious belongings. I unlocked the front door and stepped out onto the porch, folding my arms. "What is the meaning of this?" Greg yelled, pointing a finger at the tarp. His face was red with anger. "Those tools are worth thousands of dollars. You left them outside. They are perfectly secure under the waterproof tarp," I answered smoothly. "But my garage is for my car." Sarah pushed past him, marching up to the porch steps. "Mom, you have completely lost your mind. First the phones, then the money, and now this. You are trying to ruin our weekend." "I haven't ruined anything," I corrected her softly. "I just stopped providing." "Because of yesterday," Sarah scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Are you throwing a tantrum because we had a private Thanksgiving? We just wanted a younger vibe this year, Mom. You always complain about the music being too loud. You're overreacting." "I didn't complain," I replied, my voice steady and cold. "I accepted your lie. You told me you already ate. I simply adjusted my life accordingly. If I am too old and bothersome to sit at your dinner table, I am definitely too old to pay for the car you drove here in." Greg stepped forward, trying to use his height to intimidate me. "You can't just cut us off without warning Vanessa. We rely on that money." "You rely on my money, but you hide my presence," I stated flatly. "That arrangement is over." Sarah glared at me. "Fine. Open the door. Let us inside to talk about this properly." She reached for the doorknob and twisted it. It didn't budge. Sarah rattled the doorknob again, aggressively pushing her weight against the heavy wood. "Mom, open the door," she demanded. "I changed the locks this morning," I informed her quietly. Sarah froze, her hand slowly dropping from the brass handle. Greg stared at me, the anger in his eyes shifting into genuine shock. They had always treated my house as an extension of theirs, a place to dump their clutter, drop off their laundry when their machine broke, and take whatever groceries they wanted from my pantry. "You changed the locks on your own daughter," Sarah whispered, trying to force tears into her eyes to play the victim. "I changed the locks on my house," I corrected. I reached behind the porch pillar and picked up a medium-sized cardboard box I had prepared earlier. I handed it toward Greg. He took it instinctively. "What is this?" he muttered, looking down. "Your mail that you still have routed here to avoid property taxes, 3 chargers you left in my living room, and the winter coats I bought you last month," I explained. "Take your things from the driveway. Rent a storage unit. Pay your own bills. From now on, you will call before you come over and you will wait to be invited inside. You're being incredibly selfish. Sarah hissed, her fake tears vanishing instantly. No, Sarah. I smiled softly. I'm just practicing boundaries. I learned it from you. You wanted a stress-free environment yesterday. I want a stress-free environment every day. I stepped backward into my house and looked at them one last time. Don't forget the table saw. It looks heavy. I closed the door firmly in their faces. I heard the solid, satisfying click of the deadbolt sliding into place. For a few minutes, I heard them arguing with each other in the driveway, followed by the heavy sounds of machinery being loaded into a trunk. Then the SUV drove away. 4 weeks passed. December arrived, bringing crisp winter air and a profound sense of quiet to my home. Sarah and Greg did not call to apologize. I didn't expect them to, and frankly, I didn't care. They were too busy scrambling to adjust their lifestyle now that their monthly allowance had vanished. I heard through Brenda that Greg had to sell his dirt bike to cover their new phone plan and the missed car payment. I didn't reach out. Instead, I reclaimed my time and my space. I cleared out the guest room, which had previously been a shrine to Sarah's childhood, filled with her old trophies and boxes she refused to throw away. I painted the walls a bright, warm yellow and turned it into a painting studio for myself. I bought new canvases, expensive brushes, and allowed myself to spend my own money on my own joy. I started going to a weekly book club. I took a weekend trip to the coast, staying in a beautiful hotel overlooking the ocean. I stopped waiting by the phone. I stopped worrying about whether they had enough money for groceries while I ate leftovers. The heavy, invisible backpack I had been carrying since my husband died was finally gone. I realized that my fear of being lonely had made me an easy target for their disrespect. But being alone in a peaceful house was far better than being surrounded by people who only valued my wallet. Then, 3 days before Christmas, I heard a soft knock on my front door. I looked through the peephole. It was Sarah, standing alone on the porch, holding a wrapped box. I unlocked the door and opened it just enough to speak. Sarah looked exhausted. The confident, entitled attitude from Thanksgiving was entirely gone. "Hi, Mom," she murmured, offering the wrapped box. "I brought you some tea. I was wondering if we could talk. Maybe you could come over for Christmas. We really need some help with the holiday expenses this year." I looked at her. She wasn't here to apologize for Thanksgiving. She was here because she had run out of funds for Christmas. "Thank you for the tea, Sarah," I said, gently taking the box, but not opening the door any wider. "But I have plans for Christmas. Brenda and I are hosting a potluck." Sarah's face fell. "Mom, please. We can't even afford a tree right now. Can't we just put this behind us?" "You're my mother." "I am your mother," I agreed calmly. "But I am no longer your bank. You and Greg make good salaries. You will figure it out." "So you're just going to abandon us?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I'm letting you be the independent adults you pretended to be on Thanksgiving," I replied. "If you want to come over for a cup of coffee next week, text me. We can talk then. But there will be no money, Sarah. Ever again." She stared at me, realizing the boundary was made of steel, not glass. She nodded, slowly turned, and walked back to her car. I closed the door and locked it. I walked into my kitchen, where a fresh apple pie sat on the counter waiting for my friends to arrive. I cut myself a slice, poured a hot cup of tea, and sat at my table. I took a bite. It tasted absolutely perfect. Looking back, the hardest truth I had to accept was that my generosity was actually hurting us both. By always being their safety net, I had unknowingly taught them that I was just a resource, not a person. Stepping back and packing up those tools wasn't about punishing my daughter. It was about protecting my own peace. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do both for yourself and for the entitled adults in your life is to simply stop providing. You are not required to buy your seat at anyone's table, especially your own family's. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you love? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If you found a little bit of your own journey in mine today, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's keep building a community where we choose our own peace and realize our true worth. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.